At least 3 fertility clinics in Alabama have now paused in vitro fertilization, or IVF, after the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos in a lab have the same rights as children. The fallout sending shockwaves throughout the state and sending Republican politicians scrambling.
Do you have a reaction to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling on the fact that embryos are children?
Yeah, I was all for it. We need to have more kids. We need to have an opportunity to do that. And I thought this was the right thing to do.
But I want to be very clear that this was intentional and that this is exactly what Republicans have been going for. We've seen it. You have the Heritage Foundation, you have lots of folks who are on record saying, not only do they want to go after abortion, not only do they want to go after reproductive freedom, they're going after IVF, they're going after contraception. We have a mifepristone ruling that is coming down from the Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas enriching himself from the same folks who are saying that they are trying to control women's bodies quite explicitly and going beyond that. They also want to control what they call recreational sex.
Yes.
Recreational sex. This is so clearly a patriarchal theocracy that has embodied itself in the DNA of an entire political party in the United States of America.
So in case you weren't aware, Republicans are so pro-life that they are now passing laws to stop women having more kids because they need more kids. Did I get that right, Tommy?
IVF is used to have more children, and right now IVF services are paused at some of the clinics in Alabama. Aren't you concerned that this could impact people who are trying to have kids?
Well, that's for another conversation. People need to have we need more kids.
Speaker Johnson is one of 125 Republican House members who co-sponsor legislation called the Life at Conception Act. That bill defines a human being to, quote, include each member of the species Homo sapiens at all stages of life, including the moment of fertilization or cloning, unquote. That would include a frozen embryo, of course, and the current House version includes no exception for IVF, for in vitro fertilization.
Work action to protect the unborn like nobody has ever done. Nobody has ever done it. Thank you.
There should never be room for this kind of control by force over another person's body in this country. And they can walk it back as much as they want. They have done this. Who put those judges there? Not Democrats, not independents. Republicans put those judges in there. Republicans are taking women's bodies by force, and we cannot let them do it. It has to come to an end.
As Republicans continue to fall over themselves trying to explain how Alabama's latest decision to potentially criminalize IVF is actually pro-life, their frontrunner continues to get on stage and brag about how he spearheaded the effort to overturn Roe.
But the fact that I was able to terminate Roe v. Wade after 50 years of trying, they worked for 50 years. I've never seen anything like it. They worked, and I was so honored to have done it. Well, I did something that nobody thought was possible. I got rid of Roe v. Wade. And by doing that, it put pro-lifers in a very strong negotiating position. Nobody did a job like I did, including Roe v. Wade, bringing it back to the states. What I did by killing Roe v. Wade, which everyone said was impossible.
Further touting a nationwide abortion ban with his Project 2025 plan. But sure, let's talk some more about Biden's aid, shall we?
But I want to be very clear that this was intentional, and that this is exactly what Republicans have been going for. We've seen it. You have the Heritage Foundation, you have lots of folks who are on record saying, not only do they want to go after abortion, not only do they want to go after reproductive freedom, they're going after IVF, they're going after contraception. We have a mifepristone ruling that is coming down from the Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas enriching himself from the same folks who are saying that they are trying to control women's bodies quite explicitly and going beyond that. They also want to control what they call recreational sex.
Yes.
Anyway, when the subject came up on MSNBC, AOC gave the perfect answer on how Republicans claim to uphold freedom and democracy, when truly it's a theocracy they crave, one that allows them to criminalize anything they deem contradictory to their religious beliefs.
This is so clearly a patriarchal theocracy that has embodied itself in the DNA of an entire political party in the United States of America. And as women and as any non-binary and queer person in this country, they must be defeated. There should never be room for this kind of control by force over another person's body in this country. And they can walk it back as much as they want. They have done this. Who put those judges there? Not Democrats, not independents. Republicans put those judges in there. Republicans are taking women's bodies by force, and we cannot let them do it. It has to come to an end.
But furthermore, I wanted to touch on the latter point. She also highlighted how we got here. And it's not because of Biden or the current administration. This is, as the same as with Roe being overturned.
When the crowd heard the court had overturned Roe v. Wade, there were cheers.
It took every single one of us, people across the political and ideological spectrums, to make this a reality.
A reality that for abortion rights supporters was hard to believe.
This is a nightmare. I'm 21 and I'm terrified.
And everything else that comes from a Trump-stacked Supreme Court is a result of Trump's victory in 2016. We are still living with the repercussions of that election.
He is by far the most disgraceful figure in modern presidential history. He's only become more disgraceful since 2016 and since 2020. He is a bubbling cauldron of loathsome traits, and it's only those who are actually suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, which is the way they and Fox News and all the rest of MAGA media try to brush aside all the legitimate criticisms of Trump. You have to be in the throes of some sort of toxic delusion, in a toxic cult, to believe that Donald Trump has ever been, in any sense, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, or ethically fit to be president of the United States. But his supporters are locked in on that. There is no cult of Joe Biden.
And instead of, say, focusing on the oppressive legislation anti-abortion MAGA groups are currently drawing up to be implemented day one if Trump wins and gets back in office, we're bloody talking about gaffe-offs, playing into the very narrative that the Trump camp craves so much, because it just leads to a conversation about Biden being too old. Get a grip. This is what's at stake.
And so I think this is a very, very dangerous moment, not just for our nation's physicians, but for American women in general, because the world is looking at us. IVF is something that is so deeply personal. My generation of millennial women of childbearing age, I myself have 3 children. We cannot believe this is where we are. When we talk about the fertility journeys that we have, they are deeply emotional, psychological, and not to mention economically, take a great toll when you're talking about embryos and that whole process. I really think the Republican Party will pay for this.
I want to be a mom, and we want to build a family, and I think that should be our choice.
Emily Capolito and her husband James stored their embryos at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. It's the biggest of 3 providers that have now halted new IVF treatments, the process used by 238,000 Americans every year to help get pregnant.
This is an incredibly grueling physical, mental, and emotional process.
The couple has spent more than $50,000 on treatments over 2 years and had hoped to schedule their first embryo transfer next month.
I do feel like that timeline is in jeopardy. We are on an indefinite pause.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.